The wind howled across the barren expanse of the mining colony, kicking up clouds of red dust under a darkening sky. Kalen Drake stood at the edge of his small outpost, a sturdy figure in a worn leather coat, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. It was supposed to be another quiet night, another stretch of solitude he'd learned to embrace. But tonight, the stars seemed uneasy, their cold light flickering against the swirling dust. Then he saw it. A streak of fire blazed across the sky, cutting through the atmosphere like a blade. It wasn't a meteor, too controlled, too deliberate. His heart quickened as the object arced downward, disappearing behind the jagged hills to the east. Moments later, the ground trembled beneath his feet, and a distant explosion echoed through the canyon. Curiosity fought against his ingrained caution. He had no business getting involved. Yet something pulled at him, an instinct honed from years of battle and survival. Grabbing his rifle, Kalen set off toward the crash site, boots crunching against the rocky terrain. It didn't take long to find it. The wreckage was half buried in a shallow crater, its sleek metallic surface glowing faintly under the cooling night air. Kalen approached slowly, rifle at the ready. The craft was unlike anything he'd seen before, elegant and alien, its hull marked with strange symbols that seemed to shift under his gaze. A faint sound caught his attention, a low hum interspersed with soft, labored breaths. His grip tightened on the rifle as he circled the wreckage. Then he saw her. She lay sprawled on the ground, her body partially illuminated by the ship's flickering lights. Her skin glowed faintly, a shimmering blend of silver and pale blue, and her long, flowing hair cascaded like liquid starlight. Even in her weakened state, there was a regal air about her, a quiet strength that made Kalen pause. Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto his. They were a vivid shade of violet, deep and mesmerizing. She tried to speak, her voice a melodic whisper, but the words were foreign, incomprehensible. "Easy," Kalen said, lowering his rifle slightly. "I'm not here to hurt you." She seemed to understand the tone, if not the words. Slowly, she reached out, her delicate fingers trembling. Kalen hesitated for a moment, then crouched beside her, carefully taking her hand. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost electric, sending a faint tingle up his arm. "I need to get you out of here," he said, glancing around. The crash would have drawn attention, and not the good kind. "Can you walk?" She shook her head, wincing as she tried to sit up. Without another word, Kalen slipped an arm under her shoulders, lifting her with surprising ease. She was lighter than he expected, her body radiating a strange warmth despite its cool surface. The journey back to his outpost was slow and cautious, every shadow a potential threat. Kalen kept his rifle close, his senses on high alert. The woman leaned against him, her breathing shallow but steady. Each time her eyes met his, he felt an unspoken connection, a silent plea that stirred something deep within him. Once inside his modest home, Kalen laid her gently on the cot. He grabbed a blanket, draping it over her, and set about examining her injuries. There were no visible wounds, but her energy seemed drained, her glowing skin dimming slightly. "You're not from around here," he muttered half to himself. "Who are you? What happened?" She didn't respond, but her hand reached for his again, this time with more strength. As their fingers touched, Kalen felt a sudden surge of warmth, a wave of emotion that wasn't his own. Images flashed in his mind, vast, starry vistas, towering crystalline cities, a council of beings with shimmering forms like hers, their faces etched with urgency. Then came the message, clear and undeniable. "Help me." Kalen pulled back, his breath catching. "You're telepathic," he said, more amazed than alarmed. The woman nodded, her eyes pleading. Before he could process further, a low rumble sounded in the distance, followed by the unmistakable whine of approaching engines. Kalen's jaw tightened. Someone was coming. "Stay here," he said, grabbing his rifle. She clutched his arm, her grip surprisingly firm, but he gently pulled away. "I'll handle this." Outside, the red dust swirled as a small convoy of armored vehicles approached. Kalen positioned himself behind a rocky outcrop, taking aim. His military instincts kicked in, assessing the threat. The vehicles bore no official markings, but the heavily armed figures disembarking left little doubt. They were mercenaries. "Search the area," one of them barked, his voice carrying over the wind. "The target can't have gone far." Kalen didn't wait for them to get closer. With practiced precision, he fired a warning shot, the bullet striking the ground near their feet. "Turn around and leave," he called out, his voice steady and commanding. "You're trespassing." The mercenaries hesitated, then fanned out, weapons drawn. "We've got no quarrel with you, old man," the leader said, stepping forward. "Hand over the alien, and we'll be on our way." Kalen's finger hovered over the trigger. "Not gonna happen." The mercenary smirked. "Suit yourself." The ensuing firefight was brief but intense. Kalen moved with the efficiency of a seasoned warrior, his shots precise, each movement calculated. He managed to disable one vehicle and scatter the mercenaries, but the odds were against him. Just as they began to regroup, a sudden burst of light erupted from the outpost. Kalen turned in time to see the alien woman standing in the doorway, her body glowing brightly, her eyes fierce. She raised her hands, and an invisible force rippled outward, sending the mercenaries flying. For a moment there was silence. Then the remaining mercenaries scrambled to their vehicles, retreating into the night. Kalen lowered his rifle, his gaze fixed on the woman. She swayed slightly, the glow fading as she collapsed. He rushed to catch her, cradling her gently. "You really are full of surprises," he said, his voice soft. Her eyes opened briefly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Thank you," her voice echoed in his mind before she drifted into unconsciousness. Kalen carried her back inside, laying her once more on the cot. As he tended to her, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just been irrevocably changed. The quiet existence he'd built for himself was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, and far more extraordinary. He glanced out the window, the stars twinkling in the clear night sky. Whatever lay ahead, he knew there was no turning back. The glow of dawn filtered through the small window of Kalen's outpost, casting a soft light over the alien woman as she lay on the cot. Her breathing had steadied during the night, though her luminous skin remained dim, a faint shimmer barely visible under the blanket. Kalen sat nearby, his rifle across his lap, eyes darting between her and the door. He hadn't slept. The mercenary's attack had rattled him more than he cared to admit. Whoever she was, she'd brought trouble with her, and it was only a matter of time before more came knocking. As if sensing his thoughts, the woman stirred, her violet eyes fluttering open. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence stretching between them. Then she slowly sat up, wincing slightly but managing a small, grateful smile. "You are awake," Kalen said, his voice low. "That's a good sign." She nodded, then touched her temple, her eyes narrowing in concentration. A moment later, her voice resonated in his mind, soft yet clear. "Thank you for saving me." Kalen exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "Figured you'd have more to say after last night." Her expression turned serious, and she glanced toward the window. "They will return. More will come. My mission is too important for them to stop." Asterisk asterisk. He frowned, resting his elbows on his knees. "Mind telling me what exactly that mission is? I didn't sign up for intergalactic war." She hesitated, then slowly reached out, her hand hovering just above his. "May I?" she asked, her voice echoing in his head again. Kalen nodded, and the moment her fingers touched his, the room seemed to fade away. Images flooded his mind. Towering cities of crystalline spires, a council of beings with glowing forms like hers, and finally, a desolate landscape, its surface cracking and lifeless. He felt her sorrow, her desperation, as if it were his own. Her voice came softly, weaving through the visions. "My people are dying. Our life force, the pulse, is fading. Without it, our world will wither, and my kind will cease to exist. We searched for a solution, and we found it here." Asterisk asterisk the images shifted to Earth, then narrowed to him. You are the key, Kalen. Your strength, your spirit, it is unlike anything we've encountered. Together we can restore the pulse. Asterisk asterisk. Kalen pulled his hand away, the connection breaking. He leaned back, his mind reeling. You're saying you need me to what? Save your species. She nodded, her gaze steady. To bond with me, our essences must unite to reignite the pulse. Asterisk asterisk. He stood, pacing the small room. You've got the wrong guy, he said, his voice rough. Im Noaru. I've seen enough death to last a lifetime, and I'm not looking to add interstellar savior to my resume. Her eyes followed him, calm but insistent. You saved me. That is enough. Asterisk asterisk. Kalen stopped, turning to face her. Why me? Why not someone younger, stronger? She smiled faintly, the glow in her skin pulsing softly. It is not just about physical strength. It is your resilience, your spirit. You have endured much, yet you continue. That is what we need. Asterisk asterisk. He ran a hand through his hair, the weight of her words sinking in. Before he could respond, a soft beeping sound drew their attention. The woman's expression darkened, and she moved swiftly to a device tucked under the blanket. A small, sleek communicator. She pressed a series of symbols, her eyes narrowing as alien script scrolled across the screen. They have found us, she said, her voice tinged with urgency. We must leave now. Kalen grabbed his rifle. Leave? To where? They'll track us wherever we go. She stood, steadier now, and placed a hand on his arm. I know a place. Follow me. Asterisk asterisk. Despite his misgivings, Kalen nodded. They gathered what little they could carry and slipped out into the early morning light. Leary, he had learned her name through their shared thoughts, led the way with surprising agility, her movements graceful despite her earlier weakness. They traveled toward the canyon, the rugged terrain offering some cover as they moved deeper into the wilderness. As they descended into the shadowed valleys, Kalen couldn't help but glance at her. Even in this tense moment, there was something mesmerizing about her. The way her skin caught the light, the fluid motion of her steps. He shook the thought away, focusing on the path ahead. They reached a network of caves hidden within the canyon walls. Leary guided him into one of the larger caverns, where faint bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie but beautiful glow. We'll be safe here, for now, she said aloud for the first time, her voice soft but melodic. It caught Kalen off guard. Until now, her words had only come through their shared connection. He nodded, setting down his rifle. Safe might be stretching it, but it's better than out there. She sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. You doubt yourself, she said gently, but I see your strength. Kalen chuckled dryly, leaning back against the cavern wall. You barely know me. She tilted her head, her eyes glowing faintly. I know enough. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension of their escape slowly easing. Kalen found himself watching her again, drawn to the way her glow seemed to respond to her emotions, softening as she relaxed. Your people, he said finally. How do they see all this ending? What happens if we pull this off? Leary's gaze dropped, her hands resting in her lap. If we succeed, my people will live. The pulse will return, and our world will thrive again. But, she hesitated, her voice lowering, the bond we share may change you. It is not without risk. Kalen studied her, the weight of her words settling in. And if we fail? She looked up, her eyes meeting his with quiet resolve. Then we both perish. He let out a slow breath, the reality of their situation sinking in. Hell of a choice, he muttered. Leary reached out, her hand brushing against his. You are not alone in this, Kalen. Whatever happens, we face it together. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost. A sense of purpose. It terrified him, but it also stirred a deep, unspoken resolve. Together, huh? He said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Guess we'll see if I'm as tough as you think. She smiled in return, her glow brightening ever so slightly. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the ancient walls of the cavern, they found a fragile but growing connection. And though the path ahead was uncertain, neither of them would face it alone. The cavern walls seemed to pulse softly in the dim light of the bioluminescent fungi. Kalen sat by the small fire they had managed to build, watching the flickering flames dance in the shadows. Across from him, Leary sat cross-legged, her silver-blue skin faintly glowing in rhythm with her breathing. Despite the tension that lingered from their escape, there was a calm between them now, an unspoken understanding. Kalen leaned forward, his rough hands extending toward the warmth of the fire. "You said this bond could change me," he said, breaking the silence. "What does that mean exactly?" Leary met his gaze, her violet eyes reflecting the firelight. "The bond is more than a physical connection," she explained. "It links our life forces, blending our strengths and vulnerabilities. Your human physiology will adapt to support the pulse, but it may also alter you in ways we cannot predict." Kalen frowned, letting her words sink in. "Sounds like a hell of a gamble." "It is," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "But it is a necessary one. Without this bond, my people will not survive." He nodded slowly, the weight of their shared responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't sure when he'd started thinking of it as their responsibility, but the line between her fight and his had blurred. He couldn't walk away now, even if he wanted to. Leary shifted closer, her movements fluid and deliberate. "The first stage of the bond is trust," she said, her tone softening. "Without it, the connection will fail." Kalen glanced at her, his expression guarded but curious. "And how do we prove that?" She reached out, her hand hovering just above his. "Through openness," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Through understanding." Her fingers brushed against his, and a warmth spread through him, not unlike the sensation he'd felt when they first connected. This time it was deeper, more deliberate. Images flickered in his mind again, but instead of distant worlds and council chambers, he saw fragments of her memories, moments of laughter, of sorrow, of quiet resolve as she prepared for this mission. Kalen inhaled sharply as emotions surged through him, raw and unfiltered. He saw her isolation, her fear of failure, and her hope that he might be the one to help her save her people. It was overwhelming, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he let his own memories rise to the surface, sharing his pain, his regrets, and the long years of solitude that had defined his life. When the connection broke, they sat in silence, their hands still lightly touching. Kalen felt exposed, but also lighter. Leary's expression was tender, her eyes shimmering with unspoken gratitude. "You carry much," she said softly. "Yeah," he replied, his voice rough. "So do you." She smiled faintly, her fingers curling around his. "Then we carry it together." The fire crackled between them, its warmth a stark contrast to the cool air of the cave. For a while, neither of them spoke, content to sit in the shared quiet. But the peace didn't last. The faint hum of distant engines echoed through the canyon, growing louder with each passing moment. "They've found us," Kalen muttered, grabbing his rifle and rising to his feet. Leary stood as well, her glow intensifying as she drew on her remaining energy. "We must be ready." They moved quickly, dousing the fire and retreating deeper into the cave system. The tunnels twisted and turned, leading them into a vast chamber with a high ceiling and several exits. Kalen positioned himself near one of the entrances, his rifle trained on the darkness beyond. The sound of footsteps approached, accompanied by the metallic clatter of weapons. Kalen's jaw tightened. "How many do you think?" he asked quietly. "At least a dozen," Leary replied, her voice steady despite the tension in her posture. "Perfect," he said dryly. "Stay behind me." The first mercenary stepped into the chamber, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Kalen fired, the shot echoing through the cavern as the man dropped. Shouts erupted from the tunnel, and more figures poured in, weapons blazing. Kalen moved with practiced precision, firing and taking cover as the mercenaries advanced. Leary stayed close, her hands glowing as she prepared to unleash another pulse of energy. When the moment came, she stepped forward, her body radiating light as a shockwave surged outward, sending their attackers sprawling. Despite their combined efforts, the mercenaries were relentless. Kalen gritted his teeth as a shot grazed his shoulder, the pain sharp but manageable. He returned fire, taking down another enemy. "We can't hold them off forever," he said, glancing at Leary. She nodded, her glow flickering with exertion. "We won't have to." Before he could ask what she meant, Leary closed her eyes, focusing her energy. The air around her seemed to hum, charged with unseen power. Kalen felt the hairs on his arms stand on end as a wave of heat rolled over him. "Leary, what are you doing?" he called out, concern creeping into his voice. She opened her eyes, now glowing brightly. "Trust me." With a final surge of energy, she unleashed a blinding light that filled the chamber, disorienting their attackers and creating a momentary opening. "Go!" she shouted, grabbing Kalen's hand and pulling him toward one of the side tunnels. They ran, the light fading behind them as the mercenaries struggled to regroup. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to move single file, but it eventually opened into another chamber. Here, a faint blue light emanated from the walls, illuminating a small, crystalline pool at the center. "This is it," Leary said, her voice breathless but determined. "The sacred site." Kalen looked around, his rifle still at the ready. "What now?" She stepped toward the pool, her hands outstretched. "We complete the first phase of the bond. It will protect us." He hesitated, glancing back down the tunnel. The mercenaries wouldn't be far behind. "Are you sure?" Leary turned to him, her expression resolute. "I trust you, Kalen. Do you trust me?" He stared at her for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Yeah, Bido." Together, they stepped into the pool, the cool water lapping at their ankles. Leary closed her eyes, her glow intensifying once more. Kalen felt a pull, as if the very air around them was drawing them closer. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The crystalline water rippled gently around their ankles, casting shimmering reflections on the cavern walls. Kalen stood beside Leary, his rifle slung over his back, tension coiled tightly in his muscles. His eyes darted to the tunnel entrance, half expecting the mercenaries to burst through at any moment. But for now, there was only silence, save for the soft hum of energy emanating from the pool. Leary's glow intensified as she raised her hands, her palms hovering just above the water's surface. The pool responded, its light pulsing in rhythm with her breathing. Kalen watched, his gaze flickering between her serene expression and the surreal display unfolding around them. "This place is connected to the pulse," she said softly, her voice carrying an almost reverent tone. "It will amplify our bond, protect us from those who seek to harm us." Kalen nodded, his skepticism tempered by the undeniable power of what he was witnessing. "What do I need to do?" Leary turned to him, her violet eyes searching his face. "Let go of your fear," she said, stepping closer. "Trust in me, and in yourself." He hesitated, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For so long, he had relied on his own strength, his own instincts. Trusting someone else, letting himself be vulnerable, it wasn't something that came easily. But then her hand was on his, her touch gentle but firm. The warmth of her skin sent a pulse of energy through him, calming and invigorating all at once. Her glow brightened, enveloping them both in a cocoon of light. "Close your eyes," she whispered. Kalen obeyed, drawing in a steady breath. As he did, he felt the world around him shift. The hum of the pool grew louder, resonating in his chest. His senses heightened, and he became acutely aware of Leary's presence. Her steady breathing, the subtle rhythm of her pulse, the soft curve of her hand in his. Then, without warning, his mind was flooded with images, memories, both his and hers, intertwined in a vivid tapestry of emotion and experience. He saw her world as it once was, vibrant and teeming with life, and felt the deep ache of its slow decline. He relived his own past, moments of loss, of regret, but also of quiet strength and resilience. Through it all, their connection deepened. He could feel her hope, her determination to save her people, and her growing trust in him. In turn, she felt his guarded heart begin to open, his resolve to stand by her solidifying. When Kalen opened his eyes, the glow around them had intensified, illuminating the entire cavern. The water at their feet shimmered with an otherworldly light, and the air buzzed with a palpable energy. Leary smiled, her expression a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. "It is done," she said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "The first phase of the bond is complete." Before Kalen could respond, a distant sound echoed through the tunnel, the sharp clatter of boots on stone. The mercenaries were closing in. "Looks like we're out of time," Kalen said, unslinging his rifle. "What now?" Leary stepped out of the pool, her glow dimming slightly as she focused her energy. "The bond has strengthened us both," she said. "Together we can face them." Kalen's lips curled into a grim smile. "Good. Let's give them a fight they won't forget." They took positions near the chamber's entrance, their backs against the cool stone. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the occasional bark of orders. Kalen's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline sharpening his senses. The first mercenary appeared in the tunnel, his weapon raised. Kalen didn't hesitate, firing a precise shot that sent the man sprawling. Chaos erupted as the remaining mercenaries surged forward, their weapons blazing. Leary moved with fluid grace, her hands glowing as she unleashed waves of energy that sent their attackers reeling. Kalen covered her, his rifle barking in controlled bursts, each shot finding its mark. The bond between them was palpable, their movements synchronized as if they had fought together for years. Despite their combined strength, the mercenaries were relentless. Kalen gritted his teeth as a stray shot grazed his side, the pain sharp but manageable. He glanced at Leary, her glow flickering under the strain of sustained combat. "We need to end this," he shouted over the din. Leary nodded, her expression determined. "Follow my lead." She stepped forward, her hands raised high as she summoned the full power of the bond. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and the cavern was filled with a blinding light. Kalen shielded his eyes, trusting her to guide him. When the light faded, the mercenaries were gone, their forms crumpled on the ground or retreating back into the tunnel. The chamber fell silent once more, save for the sound of their labored breathing. Kalen lowered his rifle, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "That was something," he said, his voice rough. Leary smiled faintly, her glow softening as she stepped closer. "You fought well," he chuckled, wincing slightly as he pressed a hand to his side. "Could have done without the theatrics, though." She reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. The warmth of her touch was soothing, the energy between them steady and calming. "The bond will heal us," she said, her voice gentle. "But we must rest." Kalen nodded, his gaze lingering on her. Despite the chaos of the battle, he felt a strange sense of peace in her presence. Together, they had faced overwhelming odds and emerged stronger. As they settled back by the pool, Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The bond they shared was powerful, but it also made them a target. And if the mercenaries were any indication, their enemies would stop at nothing to destroy what they had forged. "We'll need a plan," he said, his tone serious. "They'll keep coming." Leary's expression hardened, her resolve clear. "Then we will face them together." Kalen nodded, his determination matching hers. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The glow of the crystalline pool had dimmed, casting soft reflections on the cavern walls. Kalen sat on the cool stone, his back against the wall, his rifle resting beside him. His side ached from the graze he'd taken earlier, but the pain was manageable, dulled by the strange energy that now pulsed through him. Across from him, Leary knelt by the water's edge, her hands trailing through the shimmering surface. Her glow had softened, but it still illuminated the delicate lines of her features. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing through the chamber. Kalen let out a slow breath, his eyes on Leary. "So," he said, breaking the quiet, "what's the next step?" Leary lifted her gaze, her violet eyes meeting his. "The bond is incomplete," she said softly. "We've strengthened the connection, but for the pulse to truly awaken, we must complete the final phase." Kalen raised an eyebrow. "And what does that entail?" She hesitated, her fingers lightly skimming the water's surface. "It requires full synchronization," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our energies must align completely." Kalen frowned, his mind working through her words. "You mean we've got to?" Leary nodded, her cheeks flushing faintly with a soft, silver hue. "It is not just physical," she explained quickly. "It is a merging of minds and life forces. A complete unification." Kalen leaned back, his gaze drifting to the cavern ceiling. "Sounds intense." "It is," Leary said, her tone serious. "But it is also profound. It will strengthen us in ways neither of us can fully understand yet." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "All right, if this is what it takes, I'm in." Her expression softened, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You continue to surprise me, Kalen." He shrugged, a wry smile on his face. "Figured that's part of the charm." Leary moved closer, settling beside him. The warmth of her presence was soothing, and Kalen felt the tension in his shoulders ease. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand. "Before we begin, we should prepare," she said. "This process will test us both." Kalen nodded, his gaze steady. "What do we need to do?" Leary closed her eyes for a moment, her glow intensifying. "Breathe," she said, her voice calm. "Focus on the connection between us." He followed her lead, taking slow, deliberate breaths. The air around them seemed to hum, and Kalen felt a gentle warmth spreading from where their hands touched. His mind began to clear, the aches and fatigue fading into the background. As they sat in stillness, a wave of energy passed through them. Kalen's thoughts intertwined with Leary's, their memories blending in a vivid tapestry. He saw flashes of her world, its beauty and its sorrow, and felt her unwavering determination to save it. In turn, she glimpsed his life, his struggles, his losses, and the quiet strength that had carried him through. The connection deepened, and Kalen felt a surge of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to confront in years. Leary's presence was a steady anchor, her warmth drawing him closer. He opened his eyes, finding her gaze already on him. "Leary," he said, his voice low, "I don't know what's ahead, but I'm with you." She smiled, her glow brightening. "And I with you, Kalen." Without breaking eye contact, she leaned in, her lips brushing softly against his. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration, but it deepened as the connection between them strengthened. Kalen felt the pulse of energy flowing through them, a harmonious rhythm that matched the beating of their hearts. The cavern seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a cocoon of light and warmth. Kalen's hand moved to her cheek, his touch lingering as he traced the soft, glowing contours of her skin. Leary's fingers entwined with his, their bond solidifying with each shared breath. The kiss broke, but their foreheads remained pressed together, their breaths mingling in the still air. Leary's eyes shimmered, her voice a soft echo in his mind. "We are one now, Kalen. Together we will face whatever comes." Asterisk asterisk. He nodded, his resolve firm. Together. The moment was interrupted by a faint vibration in the ground beneath them. Kalen's instincts flared, and he reached for his rifle. Leary's glow dimmed slightly as she rose to her feet, her expression turning serious. "They're coming," she said, her voice steady. Kalen stood, his grip tightening on the weapon. "Then let's give them a reason to regret it." They moved in unison, their steps light and deliberate as they positioned themselves near the chamber's entrance. The bond between them heightened their senses, and Kalen felt more attuned to his surroundings than ever before. He could sense the approaching danger, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. The first mercenary appeared, his weapon raised. Kalen fired, the shot precise and lethal, Leary stepped forward, her hands glowing as she unleashed a wave of energy that sent the remaining attackers sprawling. The air crackled with power as they fought, their movements synchronized in perfect harmony. Despite the odds, Kalen felt an unshakable confidence. With Leary at his side, he was stronger, faster, more focused. The mercenaries didn't stand a chance. As the last of their enemies fell, the cavern fell silent once more. Kalen lowered his rifle, his breathing steady. Leary approached him, her glow softening as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You fought well," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "So did you," he replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. They stood together in the dim light, their bond stronger than ever. The battle had tested them, but it had also proven the power of their connection. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Kalen knew they would face them as one. For now, though, they had earned a moment of peace. The quiet hum of the crystalline cavern surrounded them as the soft light from the pool pulsed gently, a stark contrast to the recent battle. Kalen and Leary had barely caught their breath when the communicator at her waist emitted a faint chime. She retrieved it quickly, her eyes narrowing as alien symbols scrolled across the small screen. "It's a message from the Verilian Council," Leary said, her voice tinged with unease. "They demand a status report." Kalen frowned, leaning against the cavern wall. "Let me guess. They're not thrilled about the delay?" "They're growing impatient," she admitted, her glow dimming slightly. "They expected the bond to be complete by now, and they fear the mercenaries will only grow bolder." Kalen crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "Do they even care that we've been fighting off waves of those bastards? Or that we've nearly gotten ourselves killed?" Leary sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "To them, the mission is paramount. They see you as a means to an end." Her words stung more than he expected, but Kalen kept his expression neutral. "And you? What do you see me as?" Leary stepped closer, her violet eyes meeting his. "You're not just a tool, Kalen. You've proven your strength, your resolve. I trust you and I—" She hesitated, her voice softening. "I care for you." For a moment, the tension between them eased, replaced by a warmth that neither of them had expected. Kalen reached out, his hand brushing against her arm. "We've come this far together," he said quietly. "Let's finish this on our terms." Leary nodded, her glow brightening once more. "Agreed." They spent the next few hours preparing for what was to come. Leary guided Kalen through meditative exercises, helping him tap into the energy of the bond they shared. The connection between them grew stronger, their thoughts and emotions aligning in ways that defied explanation. Kalen could feel her presence within him, a steady pulse that mirrored his own. But as the connection deepened, so did the intensity of their emotions. Leary's calm exterior cracked, revealing the weight of her responsibility and the fear she kept hidden. Kalen, too, found himself confronting memories he had long buried, moments of loss and regret that he had tried to forget. Late into the night, as they sat by the edge of the pool, Leary reached out, her hand resting on his. "The final phase of the bond will test us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It will push us to our limits." Kalen nodded, his thumb brushing lightly against her fingers. "Whatever it takes, we'll get through it." Their shared resolve was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps echoing through the tunnels. Kalen grabbed his rifle, his body tensing as he rose to his feet. Leary stood beside him, her hands glowing faintly. "They found us again," Kalen muttered. Leary closed her eyes briefly, her glow intensifying. "We must move. There's another chamber deeper within the caverns, a place where the energy of the pulse is strongest." Without hesitation, they gathered their belongings and slipped into the narrow tunnel that led deeper into the cave system. The air grew cooler as they descended, the walls around them glowing faintly with the same crystalline light as the pool. The sound of their pursuers faded into the distance, but Kalen remained on high alert, his senses sharpened by the bond. They emerged into a vast chamber, its ceiling stretching high above them. At its center stood a towering crystalline structure, its surface shimmering with a kaleidoscope of colors. The energy in the room was palpable, a low hum that resonated in Kalen's chest. "This is it," Leary said, her voice filled with reverence. "The heart of the pulse." Kalen stared at the structure, awe mixing with a sense of foreboding. "What happens now?" Leary stepped toward the heart, her glow intensifying as she placed her hands on its surface. "We complete the bond," she said. "This will amplify our connection, allowing the pulse to awaken fully." Kalen joined her, his hand resting beside hers on the crystalline surface. The moment their hands touched, a surge of energy coursed through him, powerful yet strangely familiar. His mind filled with vivid images of stars and galaxies, of life flourishing and fading, and of a deep, unbreakable connection that spanned across time and space. Leary turned to him, her eyes glowing brightly. "Are you ready?" He nodded, his grip on the crystal tightening. "Let's do this." Together, they focused their energy, their breaths sinking as the heart of the pulse began to resonate. The light in the chamber grew brighter, enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth and power. Kalen felt their bond solidify, an unshakable connection that transcended words. But as the process reached its peak, a sudden surge of pain shot through him. His vision blurred, and he staggered back, clutching his chest. Leary's glow flickered, and she reached out to steady him. "Kalen!" she called, her voice filled with concern. "I'm fine," he gritted out, though the pain was unlike anything he'd felt before. "What's happening?" Leary's expression was grim. "The bond is stabilizing, but your body is resisting the transformation. You must endure it." Kalen nodded, his determination unwavering. "I've been through worse." He forced himself to stand, focusing on the connection between them. Slowly, the pain subsided, replaced by a sense of unity and strength. The light around them pulsed in rhythm with their hearts, growing brighter with each passing moment. Finally, the energy in the room reached its peak, and the heart of the pulse emitted a blinding flash. When the light faded, Kalen and Leary stood together, their bond complete. The chamber hummed with a quiet power, the heart glowing steadily. "It's done," Leary said, her voice filled with quiet awe. Kalen nodded, a sense of calm settling over him. "We're stronger now. They won't know what hit them." But even as they prepared to face whatever came next, Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The bond had given them strength, but it had also made them a target. Their enemies would stop at nothing to destroy what they had built. As they stood side by side, ready to face the challenges ahead, Kalen knew one thing for certain. He would fight with everything he had to protect Leary and the bond they shared. Together, they were unstoppable. The chamber hummed with a steady energy, the heart of the pulse glowing softly in the center of the vast cavern. Kalen stood beside Leary, their hands still resting on the crystalline surface. The intense connection they had forged moments ago lingered between them, a tangible thread that bound their minds and bodies in perfect harmony. For a brief moment there was peace. Kalen could feel the quiet strength within him, a new energy coursing through his veins that made every breath feel lighter, every movement more purposeful. Leary's glow pulsed gently beside him, her presence a calming anchor amidst the overwhelming surge of power. But the peace didn't last. A sudden tremor shook the cavern, dust and small rocks cascading from the ceiling. Kalen instinctively reached for his rifle, his eyes scanning the chamber for signs of danger. Leary's expression tightened, her glow flickering as she turned toward the entrance. "They're here," she said, her voice low and resolute. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the tunnels, growing louder with each passing second. Kalen's grip on his rifle tightened, his body tensing as he positioned himself between Leary and the oncoming threat. "Looks like they brought reinforcements," he muttered, his tone laced with dry humor. Leary stepped forward, her hands glowing as she prepared to channel the energy of the pulse. "They will not take this from us," she said, her voice steady. "We are stronger now. Together." Kalen nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Let's show them what they're up against." The first wave of mercenaries entered the chamber, their weapons raised and their movements calculated. Kalen wasted no time, firing off precise shots that sent two of them sprawling to the ground. The others scattered, seeking cover as they returned fire. Leary raised her hands, and a wave of energy erupted from her palms, sending several mercenaries flying backward. The light from her glow intensified, illuminating the cavern in a radiant display of power. Kalen moved in sync with her, his shots coordinated with her bursts of energy. Together, they were a formidable force, their bond enhancing their every action. But the mercenaries were relentless. More poured into the chamber, their numbers seeming endless. Kalen gritted his teeth as a bullet grazed his shoulder, the pain sharp but manageable. He shifted his stance, firing another round that took down an enemy attempting to flank them. "They're not giving up," he called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. Leary's glow flickered briefly, her energy strained from the continuous assault. "We must hold the line," she said, her tone unwavering. "The heart will protect us if we can keep them at bay." Kalen nodded, determination burning in his eyes. He fired another shot, then glanced toward Leary. "Stay close to me." She moved to his side, their backs against the heart as they faced the onslaught together. The bond between them pulsed stronger, a steady rhythm that guided their actions. Kalen felt her presence in every move, her thoughts aligning with his as they fought as one. Despite their efforts, the mercenaries began to close in, their coordinated attacks pushing Kalen and Leary to their limits. The chamber echoed with the sound of gunfire and the hum of energy, the air thick with tension. Then, a new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the cavern. Kalen and Leary exchanged a brief glance, their expressions shifting from determination to cautious hope. "The heart," Leary whispered, her eyes widening. "It's awakening." The crystalline structure behind them pulsed with a brilliant light, its energy surging outward in waves. The mercenaries faltered, their movements slowing as the overwhelming power of the pulse filled the chamber. Kalen felt the energy coursing through him, amplifying his strength and sharpening his focus. Leary stepped forward, her glow merging with the light of the heart. She raised her hands, and the energy of the pulse responded, creating a protective barrier that surrounded them. The mercenaries' weapons were rendered useless, their bullets disintegrating upon contact with the barrier. "Now's our chance," Kalen said, his voice firm. "Let's finish this." With renewed strength, they pushed back against the remaining mercenaries. Kalen's shots found their marks with unerring precision, while Leary unleashed powerful bursts of energy that sent their enemies reeling. One by one, the mercenaries fell or fled, their resolve crumbling in the face of the combined might of Kalen, Leary, and the heart. As the last of their enemies retreated, the chamber fell silent once more. Kalen lowered his rifle, his breathing heavy but steady. He turned to Leary, her glow softening as the energy of the pulse settled. "We did it," he said, his voice tinged with both relief and exhaustion. Leary nodded, her expression a mixture of pride and quiet resolve. "The heart is fully awakened. Its energy will protect us and strengthen our bond." Kalen exhaled slowly, the weight of their victory sinking in. But even as relief washed over him, he knew this was only the beginning. The mercenaries had been a formidable enemy, but the true challenge lay ahead. The Virilian Council, the pulse, the fate of an entire species, it was all still in the balance. Leary stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Thank you, Kalen," she said softly. "I could not have done this without you." He met her gaze, a small smile playing on his lips. "We're in this together, remember?" She smiled in return, her glow brightening ever so slightly. The bond between them pulsed steadily, a reminder of the connection they now shared. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. For now, they had earned a moment of peace. But Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The awakening of the pulse had drawn attention, and their enemies would not rest until they had claimed its power for themselves. As they stood together in the quiet hum of the cavern, Kalen felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come this far, and he was determined to see it through to the end. The chamber remained bathed in the soft glow of the heart of the pulse, its crystalline structure emitting a steady hum of energy. Kalen and Leary stood at its center, their breaths slowly evening out as the adrenaline of battle began to fade. The bond between them pulsed rhythmically, a constant reminder of the connection they had forged. For a moment, the weight of their victory settled over them like a warm blanket, but the silence was short-lived. A sudden, sharp vibration rippled through the cavern, shaking the walls and sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Kalen's eyes snapped toward the entrance, his rifle already back in his hands. Leary turned as well, her glow intensifying as she prepared for whatever was coming. "They're regrouping," Kalen said, his voice grim. "That didn't take long." Leary nodded, her expression focused. "They will not stop until the heart is under their control." Before Kalen could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnels once again. This time, the rhythm was heavier, more deliberate. Whoever was coming wasn't just another wave of mercenaries. These were elites, and they were bringing heavier firepower. "We need to hold them off," Leary said, stepping forward. "The heart's energy will protect us, but we must give it time to stabilize." Kalen set his jaw, moving to stand beside her. "Then we make our stand here." The first of the elite soldiers emerged from the tunnel, their armor bulkier, their weapons larger and more advanced. Kalen's rifle barked immediately, his shots precise. One soldier fell, but the others pressed forward, their shields absorbing the initial barrage. Leary raised her hands, her glow intensifying as she summoned a wave of energy. It surged outward, colliding with the soldiers and forcing them back. But unlike the previous attackers, these elites recovered quickly, their coordinated movements revealing a level of training far beyond the mercenaries. Kalen fired again, his aim unwavering, but the soldiers adapted, spreading out and returning fire with deadly accuracy. Bullets and energy blasts ricocheted off the cavern walls, the sounds of battle filling the air. Leary stepped closer to the heart, her hands outstretched as she drew more power from its energy. The crystalline structure pulsed in response, sending waves of light through the chamber. With a determined expression, she unleashed another burst, this time more focused, targeting the soldiers' weapons. Several of their firearms overloaded, sparking and emitting smoke as they were rendered useless. Kalen seized the opportunity, firing in quick succession to disable the disarmed soldiers. "Nice work," he called out, glancing at Leary. She gave a faint smile, though her glow flickered slightly. The strain of maintaining her connection to the heart was beginning to show. The reprieve was brief. A low, mechanical whine echoed through the tunnel, followed by the heavy thud of approaching footsteps. Kalen's eyes narrowed as a towering figure emerged, a soldier clad in advanced exoskeleton armor, wielding a massive energy cannon. The weapon hummed ominously as it charged. "Trouble incoming?" Kalen muttered, repositioning himself. The armored soldier raised the cannon, aiming directly at the heart. "Protect it!" Leary cried, her voice urgent. Kalen didn't hesitate. He fired at the soldier, but the bullets barely dented the thick armor. The soldier's cannon fired, a searing beam of energy shooting toward the heart. Leary reacted instantly, raising a barrier of light that deflected the blast, though the force of the impact sent her stumbling back. The soldier advanced, the cannon charging for another shot. Kalen moved quickly, circling around to find a weak point. His eyes scanned the armor, noting a faint gap at the back of the exoskeleton near the power core. It was a small target, but it was all he needed. "Keep that barrier up," he shouted to Leary. She nodded, her focus unwavering as she maintained the protective shield. Kalen took a steadying breath, then darted forward, using the cover of the barrier's glow to close the distance. The soldier turned, but Kalen was faster. He fired a single, precise shot, the bullet finding its mark. The power core sparked violently, and the soldier staggered as the exoskeleton malfunctioned. Before the soldier could recover, Kalen delivered another shot to the core, and the massive figure collapsed with a heavy thud. Leary lowered the barrier, her glow dimming as she exhaled deeply. "Well done," she said, her voice filled with both relief and exhaustion. Kalen gave a curt nod, But there was no time to celebrate. More footsteps echoed through the tunnels, signaling yet another wave of attackers. He glanced at Leary, his expression grim. "How much longer do we need?" "The heart is nearly ready," she said, her glow pulsing faintly. "But it needs more time." Kalen's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then we hold them off for as long as it takes." The next wave of soldiers poured into the chamber, their movements coordinated and relentless. Kalen and Leary fought side by side, their bond allowing them to anticipate each other's actions. Kalen's shots were precise, each one finding its mark, while Leary's energy blasts kept the enemy at bay. Despite their best efforts, the sheer number of attackers began to overwhelm them. Kalen felt the strain in his muscles, the burn of exertion as he fought to keep pace. Leary's glow flickered more frequently, her energy reserves dwindling. "We can't keep this up forever," Kalen said, his voice tight. Leary nodded, her expression determined. "The heart will soon reach its full potential. When it does, it will unleash a wave of energy strong enough to drive them all back. Then we just need to buy it a little more time," Kalen said, firing another shot. The chamber shook again as the heart's energy built to a crescendo. The light it emitted grew brighter, filling the space with a radiant glow. The hum of its power grew louder, resonating deep within the cavern. Kalen and Leary stood together, their backs to the heart as they faced the oncoming soldiers. The energy of their bond pulsed stronger than ever, fueling their determination. Despite the odds, they held their ground, fighting with everything they had. And then, with a final, blinding flash, the heart released its energy. A powerful wave surged outward, sweeping through the chamber and beyond, overwhelming the attackers. The soldiers were thrown back, their weapons rendered useless as the light consumed them. When the light finally faded, the chamber was quiet once more. The soldiers lay motionless, their assault stopped in its tracks. Kalen lowered his rifle, his breathing heavy, and turned to Leary. "It's over," he said, his voice filled with quiet relief. Leary nodded, her glow steady but soft. For now, though the battle had been won, they both knew the fight was far from over. The chamber was quiet now, the hum of the heart of the pulse a steady, reassuring presence. Its crystalline form pulsed with a gentle light, a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed the cavern moments ago. The defeated soldiers lay scattered across the floor, their weapons disabled and their armor scorched by the energy wave. Kalen and Leary stood side by side, their breathing heavy but synchronized, their bond an unspoken thread of strength between them. Kalen lowered his rifle, letting it rest against his leg. His sharp eyes swept over the chamber, ensuring there were no lingering threats. "They're not getting up anytime soon," he muttered, his voice rough with exhaustion. Leary's glow softened as she stepped forward, her hands still faintly shimmering. She extended her senses, feeling the lingering energy of the pulse reverberating through the cavern walls. "The heart has stabilized," she said, her tone calm but resolute. "Its power will now spread, restoring the life force of my people." Kalen gave a small nod, though his focus remained on the fallen soldiers. "That should buy us some time," he said. "But they'll send more. They always do." Leary turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but they will not find us unprepared." He met her gaze, and for a moment, the weight of their shared journey hung between them. Despite the odds, they had stood together and won. The bond they had forged was stronger than any force that had sought to tear them apart. "I wasn't sure we'd make it this far," Kalen admitted, his voice quieter now. "But here we are." Leary smiled, the warmth of her glow reaching out to him. "You've been more than I ever could have hoped for, Kalen," she said, her voice filled with quiet admiration. "Not just as a protector, but as a partner." He shifted slightly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Guess I've still got a few surprises left in me." They stood in silence for a while, the tension of the battle gradually giving way to a quieter, more introspective mood. Kalen leaned against the crystalline structure, his hand resting lightly on its cool surface. The energy that radiated from the heart was soothing, a reminder of the purpose they had fought so hard to protect. Leary moved closer, her steps slow and deliberate. She stopped just in front of him, her violet eyes searching his face. "There is something I must ask of you," she said, her voice soft but earnest. Kalen straightened slightly, his expression cautious. "Go on." Her glow brightened faintly, and she reached out, her hand lightly brushing against his. "When the pulse spreads, it will transform not just my people, but the world around us. It will bring life and energy where there was once decay. But it will also mark the beginning of a new era." He frowned, his brow furrowing. "And what does that mean for us?" Leary hesitated, her fingers curling gently around his. "The bond we share will tether you to the pulse," she explained. "It will sustain you, but it will also change you. You will no longer be bound by the limitations of your kind." Kalen's gaze sharpened. "You're saying I won't be human anymore?" "Not entirely," she said, her voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. "You will become something more. Something unique." He was silent for a long moment, his mind turning over her words. The idea of losing a part of himself, of leaving behind the life he had known, was a weight he hadn't fully considered. Yet, as he looked into Leary's eyes, he felt a strange sense of clarity. "What happens if I say no?" he asked finally. Leary's expression softened, her glow dimming slightly. "The pulse will still spread," she said, "but our bond will weaken. You will age as all humans do, and eventually, we will be separated." Her words hung heavily in the air, and Kalen felt a pang of something deep and unspoken. The thought of leaving her, of losing this connection, was more unsettling than he had expected. "I've spent most of my life running from connections," he said quietly. "From people, from responsibility. But with you," he trailed off, shaking his head, "it's different." Leary stepped closer, her other hand resting gently on his chest. "You are not alone, Kalen," she said. "You never have to be again." He exhaled slowly, his gaze steady. "Then I'm in," he said. "Whatever this new life is, we face it together." Leary's smile returned, and for a moment, the glow of the heart seemed to reflect the warmth between them. She leaned in, her forehead resting lightly against his. The bond between them pulsed stronger, a steady rhythm that echoed in both their hearts. "Together," she whispered. The quiet moment was broken by the faint sound of the communicator at Leary's waist. She stepped back, retrieving it and glancing at the screen. Her expression shifted, a mix of relief and resolve. "The council has received the pulse," she said. "They sense its awakening. Our people will begin to heal." Kalen nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Good. Then we've done our part." Leary's glow brightened slightly, and she looked up at him. "There is still much to do," she said. "But for now we rest." He couldn't argue with that. The battle had taken its toll, and the journey ahead would require all the strength they could muster. Together, they moved to a quieter corner of the chamber, the hum of the heart providing a steady backdrop. As Kalen settled beside Leary, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The path ahead was uncertain, but he no longer faced it alone. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together, their bond unbreakable. And for the first time in a long time, Kalen allowed himself to hope.